Now, preview time. So let's take a look at what's coming your way.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another brand new installment of Renegades Reviews, exclusively here as always on the Casa D18 Studios channel. I, of course, am your host, the Renegade JJ Williams, and it's time to take a look at another film starring musicians as we take a look at the Beatles in Help, starring John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, Ringo Starr, Eleanor Braun, Leo McKern, Victor Spinetti, and Roy Kinnear. What's going on, everybody? Thank you for joining me here once again for another brand new installment of Renegades Reviews. As I said in the introduction, we're going to keep on going through our month of movies that star musicians, and today we're going to take a look at the Beatles in Help. And once again, let me apologize for my voice. You guys know we do filming in advance here on the Casa channel. I'm filming this the same day I filmed Rio Bravo, so my voice is still very hoarse and very sore and tired from all the wrestling action we called across the multiverse of media here this weekend. Forgive me. This is probably one of my favorite Beatle films, so if I don't come off as too enthusiastic as I'm describing it, it's probably why. It's just my voice is so tired from the weekend. But I digress. Let's get into the Beatles and Help. And as our movie opens, an Eastern cult prepares to sacrifice a woman to their goddess, Kaili, when they notice that she is not wearing the sacrificial ring. Instead, Ringo Starr, the drummer of the Beatles, has the ring, which was sent to him by the intended victim, who is a fan of the Beatles. Determined to retrieve the ring and sacrifice the girl, the chief priest, Clang, the high priestess, Ami, and several cult members leave for London, England. After a number of failed attempts to steal the ring without Ringo noticing, they confront him inside of an Indian restaurant. Ringo learns that he will be the next sacrifice if he does not give up the ring. However, the ring is stuck on his finger and he cannot take it off. As a result, the Beatles are chased around London by members of the cult. When a jeweler fails to cut the ring off, the band turns to the bumbling efforts of a mad scientist and his assistant. When the scientist's equipment has no effect on the ring, the scientist decides that he must somehow acquire the ring. Ame then comes to the Beatles' rescue and she tries to shrink Ringo's finger in order to get the ring off with ease. But the cult and the scientists ambush the band's home, causing Ame to drop the syringe in shock, shrinking Paul McCartney instead. The band runs to the Austrian Alps and narrowly escapes a trap thanks to Ami, who is secretly trying to aid the Beatles. In order to stay safe, the band asks for protection from Scotland Yard, and they are hidden inside of Buckingham Palace, narrowly avoiding capture by the scientist. Later on at a pub, Clang sets a trap for Ringo, which involves a trapdoor and a tiger. The Beatles then flee to the Bahamas and are followed by the cult, the scientist, and local police. After Ringo is nearly captured, the police have the other Beatles pose as Ringo in order to try to confuse the cult members. Despite their best efforts, the scientist captures Ringo and hides him aboard a boat where he intends to cut off his finger in order to get the ring. Ame rescues Ringo by giving the scientist a shrinking solution in exchange. Ame and Ringo then dive into the ocean to escape, but Ringo can't swim, and they are both captured by Klein and his followers. Ringo is then about to be sacrificed on the beach when suddenly the ring comes off. He puts the ring onto Klein's finger, who is then chased by his own cult as the song Help plays in the background and our movie comes to its end. Beatles movies are always a fun time. That's the tweet, as we like to say here on the multiverse of media. Beatles movies are always a fun time. Yes, you can argue me Let It Be, which essentially documents the breakup of the band. Fair. I'll concede that one. But A Hard Day's Night, Help, Yellow Submarine, and For Everything Wrong with It, Magical Mystery Tour are all a fun time, if nothing else. Some of the movies may make absolutely no sense, but they're still fun. Some people think that A Hard Day's Night is better than Help. Some people think that Help is better than A Hard Day's Night. For me, it comes down to what you like. A Hard Day's Night is essentially a fictional telling of a day in the life of the Beatles. So there's some portions of it that, while not a documentary film, come off as almost documentary-esque because it's supposed to be a fictional day in the life of the band. This is stuff they dealt with every day. So while there was acting involved, they didn't really have to act, if that makes any sense. Help is a straight-up movie. It's the first legitimate movie, in my opinion, for the Beatles. Because, again, while there may have been a script and storyboards and all that stuff involved in A Hard Day's Night, it's based on things the band had to deal with on a regular basis, going from town to town, doing TV shows, recording albums, getting rehearsals done, trying to drive away fans. It's all stuff they dealt with on a regular. But Help, you've got this cult trying to chase the band to get back a ring that they need to sacrifice a girl. Like this is all some straight up movie stuff, you know what I mean? So it really just kind of comes down to the scale and what do you prefer? Do you prefer a movie? Do you prefer something that's somewhat autobiographical? I personally, and it's hard, it's like a coin flip. It's Harvey Dent Two-Face, One day of the week I'll pick A Hard Day's Night, next day I'll pick Help, as far as which one I prefer. But I really like what they did in Help and actually trying to come with some kind of a story, some kind of a script that, while to some people it makes absolutely no sense, to me it does. It's a very simple story, a little far-fetched, I'll give you, but we're talking 60s British cinema. Like it's not like it is today, for real. I think this movie, for its time and its place in cinematic history, does a hell of a job. And you figure Ringo Starr went on to have a somewhat film career once the Beatles broke up. You figure Paul McCartney had a movie in the 80s, which co-starred Ringo, ironically. You figure John went on and did a movie during the height of Beatlemania called How I Won the War. They obviously were good enough actors and big enough drawing power as names to be able to spin off into acting once the band dissolved in 1969-1970. George is the only one that didn't really do any acting, but he was heavily involved in Monty Python during the 70s. He did do soundtrack music for things like Lethal Weapon. and Shanghai Surprise, I want to say it was called, with Madonna and Sean Penn. He did get his hands involved. Hell, he did an entire soundtrack album called Wonderwall Music while the Beatles were still together. So he even dabbled a little bit in the cinema, just not really in front of the camera. He stayed more behind the camera. Leo McKern, Rumple of the Bailey for British television fanatics. My dad made sure to point that out to me. He used to watch that on a somewhat regular basis. Roy Kinnear, the assistant to Victor Spinetti's Mad Scientist. It's Veruca Salt's dad in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory with Gene Wilder. That's probably what he's best known for. I still remember the day I made the connection because obviously I grew up watching Willy Wonka. I grew up watching the Beatles. But it's not until you reach that certain age, I want to say maybe your early teens, when you start to notice faces from one thing that are in another thing. And you're like, wait a minute. I still remember the first time I made the connection. I saw Veruca's dad. I was like, wait a minute. And then I saw Help again. And I was like, that's Veruca's dad. I mean, it sounds so silly nowadays, but for an early teenage renegade, that was a huge moment for me, making that connection. It was like, whoa, I love both of these films. When it comes to my rating for the Beatles, and you know what, let me backtrack here for a second, because we cannot gloss over the soundtrack. Arguably one of the best soundtracks to a Beatles film. And again, you got some heavy hitters, because on A Hard Day's Night, you got the title track, you got Can't Buy Me Love. You've got I Should Have Known Better, and If I Fell, and I Love Her. Over on Yellow Submarine, you've got the title track, you've got Eleanor Rigby, you've got All You Need Is Love. Over on Let It Be, you've got the title track. You've got One After 909, you've got Two of Us, you've got Get Back. Magical Mystery Tour, you got the title track, you've got Fool on the Hill, you've got I Am the Walrus. All of those iconic songs. But I feel like Help is probably the strongest soundtrack, track for track for track, because you've got Help, you've got Another Girl, you've got Ticket to Ride, you've got You're Gonna Lose That Girl, The Night Before, you've got I Need You, you've even got an Indian inspired rendition of A Hard Day's Night called Another Hard Day's Night, which was produced by George Martin, their longtime producer. You've got some really good track for track for track heavy hitters here. You cannot sleep on the Help soundtrack. When it comes to my rating for the film now, I'm gonna give it 4.5 out of 5 stars. And you're probably sitting there wondering, why don't you give it a full 5? And for me, I feel like the one thing that really brings it down for me is the constant painting of Ringo, if you will. In order to sacrifice the person to the goddess of Kaili, the victim must be painted red. And it's not so much the painting in general that I have an issue with, but there are multiple times throughout the film where Ringo gets painted and there's no follow through, no success. I feel if they had scaled that back just a little bit, might have gotten the 5 stars for me. I completely understand running gags and stuff like that, but to consistently set up and not deliver is like watching a wrestling match with false finish after false finish after false finish after false finish, and then it ends in a disqualification. At no point was the trigger pulled, so to speak. They set it up and they set it up and they set it up and they set it up. And we know it's the Beatles. They're not going to succeed. But I feel like if they had set it up just a little bit less, then it wouldn't have been so over the top, so obvious. You know what I mean? That's just where I'm coming from on it. But 4.5 out of 5 stars for Help. What do you guys think? Those of you that have seen it. Let me know if you're watching the premiere. Leave your thoughts and comments over here. If you're watching on demand later in the day, leave your thoughts and comments down here. Let's have that conversation, that discussion, that debate, that interaction that I'm always asking you guys for in the comments below. And make sure you guys tune in tomorrow, right here to the Casa D18 Studios channel, as we present another week's worth of Throwback Thursday. Classic episodes of Talk Wrestling, No DQ and AV, Dad's on Wrestling, Renegade of Wrestling, Stat Boy Rants, the Indie Force Podcast, A Hardy Conversation, the ATW View, Open Mic Night. So much good stuff in store for you this week on Throwback Thursday. And the next time you'll see me right here on the channel with another brand new installment of Renegades Reviews, we'll be wrapping up the week of movies that star musicians, and we're going to take a look at the Who's rock opera Tommy, starring Oliver Reed, Anne Margaret, Elton John, Eric Clapton, Jack Nicholson, Tina Turner, and of course The Who, Pete Townsend, Keith Moon, John Entwistle, and Roger Daltrey himself as Tommy. You don't want to miss out on any of that content right here on the Casa D18 Studios channel. So make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure that notification bell is turned on so you don't miss out anytime a video drops right here on the Casa D18 Studios channel or anytime we go live, as is the case with Stat Boy Sports Bar, Open Mic Night, pay-per-view PLE coverage, etc. Share these videos with your family, friends, loved ones, coworkers, movie fanatics, cinephiles in your life, fans of the Beatles, fans of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, or Ringo Starr, fans of Leo McKern and Rumpel of the Bailey, fans of Victor Spinetti, fans of Roy Kinnear or Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, fans of Eleanor Braun, fans of British comedy. Anybody you can think of that would enjoy this content in this video, share it with them. It's the only way we're going to keep my visibility in YouTube's algorithms now that I am a monetized channel. Thank you once again to everyone who joined me here today watching the episode. Thank you to everybody who helped me reach the milestone so that I am now monetized. It means so much more to me than you will ever know. And I will see you guys next time.